Part of the reason that we like certain dramas on TV or at the movies is because of the twists and turns that occur in the movie, right? And I've got to be honest with you, I'm a purist when it comes to this. I always want the good guy to win. I never want to leave the theater with the good guy kind of still hanging in balance. I don't care if there's another movie coming out. I don't care if it would ruin the book that you read. I want us to get to the point at which everything ends happily. Okay? But along the way, I want there to be things that look like they're going to defeat the character. There are going to be trials. There are going to be struggles. There's going to be suffering, so that in the end, the good guy, it becomes a better story because of what the characters went through, right? But in the midst of it, I don't like watching it. There's only a couple of television shows that Shauna and I watched religiously. And this is like where Judge the Pastor time comes up. The Bachelor. Kidding, not The Bachelor. And you don't need to feel guilty if that's your thing. As you grow spiritually, the Lord will, He'll bring you through certain things. The Bachelorette, on the other hand, no. One of the shows, we love suspense. So we can enjoy romantic movies, we can enjoy comedies, but we really enjoy high drama and suspense. And Revolution's one of the shows that we love watching. Anybody else? Wednesday nights, Revolution? All right, since there's only 4 of us, you guys actually, I wasn't going to invite the whole church, but since there's only 4 of you, every Wednesday night, if you'll come tuck our kids in, we'll wait on you in the living room, we'll get it ready. But we were watching, we were catching up last night on this week's episode, and I don't like watching, like when the music starts playing. But I do know this, when we get to the end of the story and the good guys win, they better win. I'm so grateful for the story because of what the twists and turns created. It made the good part in the end that much better. But when it comes to our lives, we want our lives to be very different than our favorite movies, right? We want kind of a baseline, right? Perfect circumstance, all is well, no sickness, no pain, no mistakes. But what if, much like how we enjoy watching movies because of the things that the characters go through, it makes the ending that much better? What if God is up to something similar in our lives, at least as part of His purpose? It makes the end better because of the things we go through along the way. What if that's what God is up to? And when we said last week about Joseph's story is that Joseph has he's exited out of a life-crashing moment, right? Life has crashed for Joseph. That's the whole crux of this series. And as we're on point 5 today, let me tell you what happened last week in case you weren't here. Life actually, believe it or not, it quit crashing for Joseph. And when it did, we said when he comes out of that, when we come out of the crash, will we set down our faith? Will we transfer our faith? Could Joseph have transferred his faith to Pharaoh because Pharaoh basically rescued him? And we said, no, what Joseph did, what we should do is when we come out of the crash, we should keep our faith. We should keep our focus with our faith on God and not set it down and not transfer it. And what I want to do today is give you a second purpose beyond the faith question of what should we do? What else should we do when our crash is over? I want to show you Joseph's story. Here's where we left off last week. And just so in case you're just needing to catch up, Joseph had been elevated to second in command only behind Pharaoh. And Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams and let Pharaoh know that there will be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And we need to get ready for this. And the plan Joseph gave to Pharaoh, which Pharaoh loved, was this. Let's save. This is a novel idea to actually save something in the good years so you have something in the lean years. Anybody else ever made that mistake besides me? So they saved 20% of everything during the 7 good years so they'll be prepared and have food during the 7 years of famine. I want to jump right into where we left off last week. So if you've got a Bible, Genesis 41. If you need a Bible, raise your hands. We are well equipped to place one into your hands. Just keep your hands up high. Get a Bible free this morning. If you're a first-time guest, you're going to get a free Bible today, a free mug or journal. We have a dating service I run on the side to supplement my income. So just, you'll need to we'll profile you quickly and tell you who your match is. So some people are like, seriously? That would be Awesome. Page 23, if you have one of the Bibles that we've passed out this morning. We left off Genesis 41, verse 52. We'll start with 53. We'll read through the end of the chapter, and the whole point this morning is this. I want you to see that there is purpose from God behind why you and I go through life-crashing moments and even life-crashing seasons in our lives. I'm not standing up here saying that I will give you every answer to all of your why questions, because I haven't gotten those myself, but I do want to tell you partly why you've gone through some of the things that you've gone through that have been crazy painful. So would you stand with me? Let's see what Joseph does when he comes out of the crash. He keeps his faith in God. We said that last week, and now I want you to see how he uses his own crash to make a difference when other people's lives crash. 53. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, what he says to you, do." So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, this is crazy, moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. You may have a seat. You may be thinking, what's the point of this? What is the purpose? Why did Joseph go through what he went through? Let's just kind of talk this out. In verse 53, it says that the 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end. Good times always come to an end this side of heaven. They always do. No one, I know some of you have the 5-hour energy drink, and that's making you have a good day every day. They always come to an end. Let me ask you this question, and the answer is something like this, okay? All right, here's the question. Did everyone come to Joseph when they were having 7 years of plenty? No, because here's why. When your life isn't crashing, your needs aren't that great. When your life is stable, you're not desperate. And that's okay. I'm not telling you to get desperate when life is stable, but when life is stable, during the 7 years of good times, all of the earth didn't come to Egypt. Why? Because they had what they needed. Everything was fine. But when the famine shows up, what do? Life is crashing. Our kids, our wives, our grandkids are going to have nothing to eat. They're going to literally, this isn't figuratively now, they're going to literally starve to death if we don't find some food. And all of a sudden, word gets out that there's one place that has food. Where is it? It's part of Egypt, not all of Egypt, because it says Egypt came to buy. It's in part of Egypt, and the reason there's food is because Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And the reason Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, backtrack with me here, the reason Joseph could interpret Pharaoh's dream is because Joseph had been put in prison for something he didn't do. And the reason Joseph was even in Potiphar's house in the first place is because he had been sold by his brothers to someone who took him to Egypt. My point is this: had Joseph's life not crashed, he would not have been able to help what it says, all the earth, when their lives crashed. Huge principle about to show up on the horizon. I hope that it'll sink in with you like it did for me as I just was preparing the last few days. Here's the big idea. If Joseph's life had not crashed, he would not have been able to help people whose lives were crashing in a major way. And while I don't want your life to crash, I promise you, I don't pray for that, okay? It was crazy when we began this series. It seems like people's lives started falling apart. My bad, okay? No, I assume the Lord knew that. He led us to this series, and there's a reason why he gave it to us this fall as opposed to last fall or next fall. I would never pray for that, but the reality we've said throughout the series is your life is going to crash. And part of why your life is going to crash, and this is not going to make you happy, this is not going to seem fair, it is painful, it's a painful truth, but it is the truth. Part of why your life crashes is so that you will help other people when their lives crash. I want to give you something I learned this week. Shauna and I had the privilege to be down at Saddleback Church in Orange County doing a couple workshops and attending a conference there. And she and I were able to listen to a session by Rick Warren, who's the pastor there. And one of the reasons it was the session was called Don't Waste Your Pain, and a little bit of what we're talking about this morning. And one reason it was so powerful, about 6 months ago, his son, who had a mental illness, many of you saw this on CNN or wherever, his son committed suicide. And so to hear him just in a gut-wrenching, raw, emotional kind of way, but then he pulled out some principles that were great. I want to give you what he shared with us as the 6 stages of grief, and then I want to use the last stage, stage 6, to launch us into the rest of our time together this morning. So I think this could be helpful. If you have notes, if not, I can send it to you later this week. The first stage is shock. Just that human emotion, just surprise, shock. I can't believe this happened. How did this happen? I never saw this coming. Shock. The second is sorrow. Sorrow. He said sorrow is really this godly emotion. And here's what he said that was really helpful. Really made it simple for Shauna and I in our minds while we were listening. He said there's shock and then there's sorrow. He said while God is never shocked by what happens when your life crashes, he's sad about it a lot. The scriptures show this in the Old Testament, New Testament. You see it, God's heart going out to people, hearing their cries. You see it through the life of Jesus when people are hurting. And so he said, shock is this human emotion, and then this sorrow is really this godly emotion. And so while God is never shocked, he's sorrowful quite often when our lives crash. The third one is the stage of struggle. This is where we ask the why questions. God, why me? God, why now? God, how did this happen? Why is this going on? And something he said that was helpful for me, because I'm a why person. Anybody else would be honest this morning and say, I'll do what you ask me to do. I just need to know why. Others of you, you're cool with us just telling you what to do. I love that. You don't need to know why. I've got all kinds of ideas now. I'm a why person, but what he said that I thought was great, he said, first of all, you're not going to get many of your why questions answered, but even if you do, explanations don't take away hurt. That's great. He said, if someone told me why God let my son kill himself, there's nothing that would have been different about my last 6 months. I thought, that's great. And he said, so you move from struggle, and then you move on to this stage that he says maybe the most powerful is surrender. It's a place where peace finally comes, even though it's painful. And he says at surrender, here's what you're doing. You're saying to God, God, I don't know why, but it's one of those, God, not my will, but yours. God, this isn't what I wanted, but I surrender. You're God. I don't know how it all works. I don't know why you took away my mom. I don't know what happened, but I surrender. Even with tears, God, I surrender. The fifth is sanctification. That's just a fancy word for the process that takes place when God makes us like his son, Jesus. And he's committed to doing that in all of our lives. I believe Paul said in Philippians 1:6 that God would complete his work in us. Whatever he started, he will bring to this completion, which is good to know. But what's crazy, he said, he brought up, I think it was from Hebrews 5, he said that the text says that Jesus learned obedience through suffering. Jesus learned obedience through suffering, and that we will not have our character fully formed without pain and trials. And some of us are like, that's all right, dude. Don't form my character. If that's what's required, if that's the currency that God takes for making us like Jesus, I'll just be half like Jesus. But God's going to use pain and trial in our lives. And he said the sixth stage is serving. And that's really the launch pad for what I want to say to us the rest of this morning. Serving, he said, when you realize the reason partly because why God takes you through your thing is so that you can show up in the lives of other people when they go through the same or a similar thing. So that's where we're going. If you have a Bible still open, I'd love for you to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 1 with me. It's a New Testament book. If you have one of the gift Bibles, we're on page 626. And we'll also have this on the screen as we move along. Paul wrote a second letter to the church at Corinth. And the theme, really, this is why we're going from Joseph in Genesis to 2 Corinthians chapter 1. The theme in this letter from Paul is that there's a reason why I've gone through the pain that I've gone through. Don't you want, if you're going to go through life-crashing moments, don't you want there to be some purpose behind it? Besides just to make you better? There's purpose behind it, and I want to give you part of what that is. 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 through 7. It's on the screen if you aren't there with us. Paul says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's suffering, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in our comfort." You're about to unlock, if you'll lean in and engage this, you're about to unlock at least part of the reason why you and I go through life-crashing moments. The first is this, that we might receive the mercies and comfort of God during all our affliction. Blessed be the God of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in how many of our afflictions? Every one of them. If we engage, if we don't set down faith, if we don't transfer faith, if we lean in and stay with him, he's willing. It doesn't make everything easier automatically, but it's just the sense that God is with us and he's providing something to us that helps us in it. Okay? So before we get on to how we should share our story of pain, understand this: God is not always, and sometimes what we've done, this is just coming to my mind right now, so I hope it's true. Sometimes what we've done is equated the word comfort with something that can't exist till we come out of the crash. I'll say it again. Sometimes what you and I have done, we get to a place of comfort and we say, I have comfort now because I came out of the crash. But do you know what the Bible teaches? That God wants to comfort us in the crash. Comfort doesn't equal the absence of a crash. Comfort can come in the midst of the crash. That's when we most need comfort. Sure, we're comforted when we're out of it, but in the midst of it, God wants to bring us comfort. And the second thing he wants to do, and here's the big idea, if you look at verse 4 going on, what I want to do is use the lens from our series to give you this thought. Here it is. We receive God's comfort during our life-crashing moments so that we are able to comfort others in their life-crashing moments. Look at how verse 4 goes on. It's exact, almost verbatim what Paul says. He says, God comforts us. Why? Give me the so that we may be able to comfort those who are in what kind of affliction? Any. You don't want this to be part of the purpose, probably. You would love to have the flatline, boring movie of a life. It's just not going to happen. But there's purpose behind it. I don't know all of the whys, but I do know some of the whys. Part of the why is so that you can help people when they walk through the same thing. Because here's what the reality is. People will not be most helped from us during our perfect lives, but in our painful lives. People will not be most helped from you in your perfect life when all is well. They'll celebrate with you, but they won't be helped by you. Don't waste your crash. That's the title of this message. Don't waste your crash. Do not waste your pain. There's purpose behind it. And the reason people learn more from our painful experiences than our perfect experiences, because when things are going perfect, certain things will never show up. When life is perfect for you, it's hard to really embrace and get grace and mercy and reconciliation and redemption and healing. So if you want to taste those things, you're going to have conflict and pain and struggle and suffering. Just give you a few examples how this works. Let's say you've been married for a year or two, and you asked Shauna and I if we can go to dinner. And we were like, yes, so we have this kind of thing. We put our kids to bed at night, and then we invite people over, order great food, take out, and we sit down and talk marriage. We do this quite often. But imagine we're sitting on one couch, you're across the living room on the other couch, Shauna's made something amazing for dessert, and you say to us, hey, we've been married about 18 months, and we're really, really struggling, and you give us all the ways we're struggling. What if I respond to you, we don't know what that's like? What if you're just like, no, we're finding ourselves to be so selfish. We don't do anything each other likes. What if Shauna and I just sat across the couch and be like, really? Are you stupid? I mean, what's your problem? Did you not read the book? I mean, I did your wedding. What's your problem? Right? That'd be crazy. No, the reason we can help you when you're struggling is because we know what it's like to struggle in those early years and the later years. It's true. Right? But we haven't been through every experience to comfort people. Let's say a couple does the same thing and they come to us, which happens way too frequently in our church, unfortunately, but they come to us and they say, hey, we've experienced a miscarriage this past week. We're going to weep with you. We're going to tell you we're in this with you. We would love to help you. We're going to pray for you, and that will be valuable. But you know what will be more valuable? When we say, hey, there's another couple in our church. They've been through this exact thing, and it wasn't easy. Hardest thing they ever did, but God's brought them through it, and I would love for them to take you to coffee. Does that make sense? Because when you and I begin to share the stories of the pain in our life, it can accomplish two things. One, it can help people who are in the midst of the same thing. And two, this is the big one to me, it can actually help people avoid certain crashes in their lives. But you can't help them in the midst, and you can't help them avoid if you never share your story. You've got to be willing to share your story. Those of you who are parents of young children or hope to be parents of young children one day, And those of you that are like, Ben, if they would come at 9 years old, I would take them. They're going to be young first, then they're going to get old. But some of you are right now. Some of you will be, even if you're single, even if you don't know, even if you don't think you want kids. Get all the advice you can from people who have kids that are a little bit older now. Yes, because they'll be in the midst of the crash with you, but they will help you avoid crashes. I can't tell you how many times pastors have set Shauna and I down and really just confessed the mistakes they made in raising their kids. If you know anything about kind of the stereotype of pastors' kids, they don't have this great future usually because they end up, their dad loved the church too much. They made them bitter. And so what's amazing, our kids aren't going to avoid all crashes, and we won't avoid all crashes as parents, but do you know we're going to be able to avoid some things because pastors have looked us in the eye and said, don't lose your children. Lose your church before you lose your children. But if they hadn't shared the story, we wouldn't know. And if you don't share your story, people won't know. There are tons of people in this room who are in their early, mid, and late 20s. I'm not one of you anymore. That's all right. You're a workaholic. It's a badge of honor for you. And I don't mean you work hard. I mean like it's your whole identity. It's the only thing you're here to do. It's the only reason you're in San Francisco. Let me tell you this. There are men and women in their 40s and 50s in our church who were you. And they burned out. Some of them lost marriages and they lost their families. Some of them don't have a relationship with their kids because of who they were in their 20s and 30s. And if they would be willing to share their story, they could help you avoid a crash. But if they don't share it, you'll never know. And if you don't know, you can never be helped. Right? Some of you have been through relational disasters. And you feel shame with that, and you're like, I can't believe I married that person, or I seriously dated that person. And so no one knows because there's a sense of shame and guilt you have with that. Do you know how many people in our church, and you see this, you're sitting in small groups with people, you talk to people out there in the lobby, you're on a serving team with people, and they're telling you about their relationship, and you see the warning signs. They don't see it, you see it. And you have that painful thing from your past, and you're almost ashamed to open up and tell them, but do you know how you could save them if you would share your story of relational mistakes? None of us like pain, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason why your life has crashed. I can't give you all of the eternal reasons. I hope that God will satisfy those for you one day in eternity, but I can give you part of the reason. Part of the reason is so that you would receive comfort from God, start there, and you'd pass it on. But you can't pass it on if no one knows your pain and your affliction. Listen, I love sharing great parts of my life. We celebrate together. I thank you that you celebrate with me and vice versa, but I'm not helping you most from my perfect life. If you say, Ben, how did you get to a place where you could start a church like this? I could just be like, I'm awesome, really. But the reality is this. Here's the pain. I was so terrified of my freshman public speaking class in college, just a 101 type thing, 5-minute speech, that I dropped the class. And so guess what? I know what it's like not to have the goods when you sense God calling you to something. Because you're going to experience it. God's going to call you to something. You're just going to be like Moses. God, I can't speak. God, I don't have what it takes. And you and I will sit down over coffee, and I'll say to you, listen, I could not even remain in my freshman public speaking class, and look what God's doing. What's your story? Not just the good ones. Let's celebrate the good ones. Awesome. Let's high five over those. I want to celebrate. Now, no one's going to tell me the good in their life because of this message, but I want to hear your good. Right? Life isn't all pain, but what we're talking about in this series is when you come out of it, you've got this story to tell. There's people who can be helped. There are people who can be helped, but they can't be helped if you don't share because they just won't know. So when you sit in your small group this week, you know why community attachment is such a huge deal for us at Epic? Not just for you to find your BFF, okay? If that happens, great. Here's how this is going to take place. You're going to sit in a circle week after week, 10 to 15 people, and something's going to crash in your life. You're going to get the courage. You're going to tell the group, and then the other person has to have the courage because otherwise the power is not unlocked, and the person who gets courage, just like your courage, is going to say, hey, we really need to go grab dessert soon. 1, because I'm hungry, right? 2, because I know what it's like to sit where you sit. This isn't the fun stuff. It is the helpful stuff. You have been through painful moments, and God's brought you the other side so you have a story to tell. So that you can say to people face to face, I know what it is to be you. I can't tell everyone that face-to-face that I know what it is. Sean and I, we've never lost a baby. So when those conversations happen, I just say, I hurt with you, but I've got somebody that can talk to you. I've never been fired from a job. So I can say, I hurt with you, but let me tell you how God brought so-and-so through when they were fired unjustly. I can't do that. And not only do we want to say to the people in this community and in our city, do we want to say, I know what it's like to be you. Here's my story of pain and how God brought me through. But we have Jesus, someone who understands what it's like to be us. And I want to show you just something profound, and then we'll come close to a close down. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14. Page 649 if you have one of those Bibles. Otherwise, we'll give it to you from the screen. Hebrews chapter 4. It's going to tell us why we should have confidence to approach God. Why you and I should say, God, here's the way I'm feeling. It's a huge reason. Maybe it's something you've never heard about how God comforts us and how Jesus is able to comfort us fully. Here's what it says. Since then, we have a great high priest. A great high priest was someone who represented the people to God and God to the people. So it's saying about Jesus, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So here's what we should do because of that. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So not only can you have people in your life telling you they know what it's like to go through what you're going through, Jesus says, I know what that is like. So he's able to sympathize in our weaknesses. He knows what it's like to be us. So when we say, God, I'm in the midst of this painful moment, Jesus says, I know what that's like. When you say, I've got physical pain, he says, I know what that's like. When you say you've been rejected by your family, he knows what that's like. When you say you've been sold out by your closest friends, he knows what that's like. When you say that I'm being punished for something I never did, he knows what that's like. Because he knows, let us confidently go to him and say, Jesus, you know what it's like. You know what it's like to be hurt. You know what it's like to lose a loved one. You know what it's like to feel physical pain. You know what it's like to suffer unjustly for something you didn't do. You know what it's like. He says, absolutely. What's your story? Does anybody know it? And you may say, and I get this, I do. You may say, Ben, you have no idea how painful it is to open up that part of me. You might say, Ben, that happened 10, 20 years ago, and I've never told a single soul. This will not be easy, but I want to ask you and ask God through you to give you the courage to be willing to open up. Some of you, as adults, have had your parents divorce. There are people in our church going through that right now. Would you share the story with them? And one of the things we've realized as a staff around here is that while we have had collective painful experiences, the 6 of us who are on staff, we haven't experienced everything. And that's where you come in. You would be blown away at the size and how young our church is, how many phone calls and texts and emails and conversations in between services we get about people whose lives are just crashing. And we do everything we can. We try our best. We have leaders that will meet with them, things like that. But sometimes we can't say to them, I know exactly what that's like. And so every one of you got an index card in your program this morning, and this is a complete voluntary thing, like pretty much everything we do at Epic, right? Except for the 5 people besides myself that are getting paid. Everyone else is a volunteer here, just so you know. We can't force you to do anything. But is there some story that involves pain that God has brought you through that you would be willing to share with other people? We would always get your permission before doing this, but one of the things we think that could be incredible for our team to have, because we don't know all of your stories, obviously, but what if our team had a story of people who've had failed businesses? What if we knew of people who went through the pain of trying to start a business and it just didn't go how they wanted it to? Or what if someone who has gone through cancer and come out on the other side? What if we could help people who have cancer right now, or other relational disasters? If anyone's had to file bankruptcy and now God's brought you on the other side and you're starting to rebuild that, you have a story to tell. And if you'd be willing, only if you would be willing, And we would never do this in a crazy, wrong way, but what we would love to do is just kind of have a list, and our staff would keep it confidential, and before we ever encourage someone to reach out to you, we would always go through you first on this. Staff, hold me to that. Do you have a story, something you've been through? Of course, I know you have a lot of good stories. That's not what we're asking for this morning. Is there something God has brought you through? Some of you have been addicted to things. Some of you have had eating disorders, and God's brought you through that. You need to be able to share that so that when we get a call, because typically those things come into the staff, but all the knowledge we have is what's happened between ourselves and what's happened among some of the people we know well around here. So what if we were able to say, hey, we have these 6 ladies who said they went through postpartum depression, and then as a mom experiences that, we can say, hey, here, one of them will meet with you. And then we just pass it off, and then you take it, and you become the person that ministers to them. And if you don't think that's part of your story and the part of the purpose behind your pain, let me say it again to you. Paul said, we've been comforted so that we may comfort those in their affliction. Are you helping complete the cycle? Here's how the cycle goes. Your life crashes. God sends comfort, and he's saying to you with that same comfort to comfort other people. But you can't comfort people if they don't know. And this isn't a self-help kind of experience for us. I'm not trying to make you or me the hero of the story. We're trying to make God the hero of the story, because what we're saying is not that I was so smart, I got smart enough to get out of it, or not that I just had positive thoughts and I got out of it. We're saying that God brought me through it. He rescued me. He healed me. He comforted me. He redeemed me. And I want to tell you how he did it. Maybe this will help you. When we pass the buckets in a little while for the offering and communication card, I would love for you to insert that card. You can fold it up. Staff will keep that confidential. But certainly we would love just to say, as we hear things, just for us to have kind of this database, like as we hear things in this community, as this thing is growing and expanding, we'd love just to say, hey, we know these 3 people. Let me see if one of them has time this week. Okay? You're like, Ben, you're asking us to really be vulnerable. Yep, I think that's where the power in this community will be unlocked. In 2 ways. We need to be willing to admit when we're in a crash, and we need to be willing to share and admit with these people, hey, I went through something like that. Let me help you out. Would you pray with me this morning? I hope that I am not the only one who's been helped this week by this message, this theme, but it's spoken volumes to me personally, I can tell you that. When you ask me how I'm doing, I love to just be able to say that everything is great, and oftentimes that certainly can be true. But it's time for me to start opening up and saying, hey, I know what it's like to be rebellious towards God. Or to say, I know what it's like to be a selfish husband. Or to lose a parent to cancer long before they should go. And I need to start opening myself up, and so do you. This is where the healing will take place. I think it's things like this that really could determine the kind of community potentially we could have here. You've got a story to share. I just want to give you the courage, whether it's with coworkers this week, people in your small group, maybe your family, maybe your neighbor. You don't know them that well, but they're going to come to you and something's going to have crashed in their lives, and you can say, wow, let's sit down. I've been through the exact same thing. God, would you give us the courage to share our story? God, even if we don't want to admit it, would you help us to believe and embrace that part of the purpose in our pain is that we might extend your comfort that you give us to other people during their affliction. God, make us this kind of church. God, we don't want to just put a facade or a mask on. We don't just want to say, everything is always great. Everything in my past is great. Life is good. We want to say, here's what's happened to me. I'm not proud of it, but God redeemed it. He brought me through it. Let me tell you the story. Make us that kind of church. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you stand with me as we respond? And in the midst of all this, remember that we have a God that when everything else fades away, he remains constant and steady. And if you've never placed your faith in Jesus, would you mark that on your card? We'd love just to visit with you, let you know how he's come to deliver us, not just from a life crash, but really from the crash of our sin. And he's paid a way for us. And he is steady. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when everything else crashes around us, which it will, he gives us the secure platform to stand on.